Right. So I've learned how to come on guard. So now we're going to look at just the most basic attack in the most basic way, which is thrusting on the lunge. So thrusting from this guard without lunging is a process of straightening your elbow. It's literally just that. There are sort of a lot of variation in that depending on hand position, but I'm going to cover that when I start covering different hand positions and how you thrust from them. But we're just going to look at a very basic thrust. So keeping our hand, our palm should be 45 degrees, which is kind of the default position. So 45 degrees this way. That makes sense. Not quite facing up, not quite facing down. And I'm just going to move to one side because this one is quite as much longer than the ones I'm used to. And we're just going to look at thrusting on the lunge. So all I do to initiate my lunge is I extend all the way out. Some men will even say to bring your hand a little bit higher than your shoulder. When you extend, I like to extend straight out. And then to basically to get my sword out as a threat, a tangible threat. This is the point where I commit to, or I line my sword up for the angle of attack. From here, I kick my front foot out. So I'm up on the heel of my foot. This is a little bit harder if you've got shoes with a heel. And when I say with a heel, I mean like, a 1 centimeter heel, like, dress shoes or combat boots or something like that. Anything that's not like as flat as a con, like Converse. It changes it a little bit. So just be mindful of that. Anyway, so I've kicked up. And then what I want to do is drive from my back foot, drive, basically straighten my back leg and roll onto my front foot like that. So just basically roll my heels down. I want to push my knee outwards so that it's out over my toes. I don't want it dipping inwards because if it's dipping inwards, I can collapse down into the ground. Like my joints will do that, which means that I have to employ a lot of strength to stay upright. Whereas if it's pushed outwards, my knee can't go any further. I can sit here for hours. It's fairly biomechanically efficient, which means I can put my muscles into the effort of my muscles into lunging further and faster. All right, come out. And then when I want to come back, all I do is pull with my back knee. So I'm basically dragging this foot like this to pull myself back. I lift my toes up to also give me some extra impetus. I come back, bring my foot back, just a little step. And then the final thing I do is come back to guard. I want to keep my sword out. As much as when I'm in guard, I can change angle of attack fairly easily. When I'm in motion, I want my sword out, basically to keep my opponent away, to stop my opponent from rushing in on me. Whereas if I withdraw my sword, it gives my opponent just that little bit more opening to come in. So I want to get my sword out to shut down any openings for my opponent, lunge at them, and come back, and retract my hand at the last minute. All right. So let's just practice that a few times. So just basic lunges. So I'm going to count them through by numbers, and then we're going to go count them through by numbers, and then we're sort of going to go through and do like just lunges on a single count. So getting ready to lunge. Start by extend, kick, lunge. You can fling your back hand out behind you for extra balance. I don't because I don't have a very long lunge, but if you have a very long lunge, you're going to want to. And then retract and back to guard. So extend, kick, lunge, retract. 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 And once more for luck. Extend, kick, lunge, retract. All right, I'm just going to shake my shoulder out. Suggest that you all do the same. Kind of good to get a bit of movement, especially up here in the mountains where it's about 2 degrees outside my house right now. So, anything that helps generate some heat. All right. So let's do that again. So just coming on guard again. But now we're going to do it on a single count. So I'm just going to call lunge, And I want you to do the motion with that same order, you know, extend, kick, lunge, retract, but on one count. And your goal is not to make it fast. Your goal is to make it smooth. So just make it smooth and slow, and I'll try and pause a bit between calls to give you as much time to do as you need. Let's go. So lunge, 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 and lunge. Right. Cool. Sorry, shake your shoulders out a bit. Now we're going to practice our lunges a bit more, but we're going to refine them. So normally when I'm teaching in a class, I just kind of look at how someone lunges and go, oh, maybe you should try moving this, or try this, or does this hurt if I poke here, and whatnot. But because we're doing online, I'm just going to list a few really common cues I find are really, really helpful for a lot of people. So the first is pushing your knee out. So when you come on guard, I want you to practice just pushing your knees as wide as you can. So if they're starting off here, pushing them as wide as you can. I'll put my epee just pointing at my knee so you can really see where it is. Just want to push as wide as you can. And I want you to hold that position for the entire duration of the lunge and see how it feels. If you're feeling a stretch in your groin, that's a good sign, although it is also a sign that you need to do more stretching. But otherwise, what you're looking for is to feel whether you feel more stable and whether you feel stronger in your lunge because you're pushing your knee to the outside. Also, when you do this, make sure that you don't roll your foot because this is quite exaggerated, but it can happen. Basically, with your foot, imagine there are 3 points of contact with the ground. So one here, and one with your heel. So basically big toe, little toe, and heel. And as much as you're pushing your knee out, you make sure your big toe, your little toe, and your heel still are in contact with the ground when you're in your stance and at the full extension of your lunge. Obviously, you're going to lift your foot off the ground to lunge. So, you can't have contact with the ground when your foot's in the air. Right, on guard, pushing your knees out, and lunge. Guard, lunge. Lunge. Make sure between each lunge you reset and push your knees out. Because if you've got a habit of dipping your knees in, it's very, very easy to renew that habit between movements. So knees out and lunge. 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 Right, and relax. So ask yourself if that felt a little bit more stable, a bit stronger. If it did, that's a sign that when you're practicing your lunges at home, push your knees out, and that goes for every weapon, not just for this. If it felt about the same, then your knees are probably in a good position to begin with. All right, so the next cue that I find is really, really good, squeeze your butt together. So I like to imagine I'm crushing a walnut with my butt. You can use any other cue that you like. Some people talk about like holding a coin between the butt cheeks, whatever. But what we're going to do is just relax. Come on, guard. Take a big deep breath to really relax. And we're going to tense our butt. And then we're just going to lunge. So lunge. Keep your butt tense. Keep your butt tense the entire way. Lunge. 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 Lunge and lunge. All right, cool. So that actually felt a lot better for me, and I have to remember to, to squeeze my butt when I lunge. But if you found that helped a lot, not only have you found a way to maybe get some more speed and explosiveness out of your lunge, but you probably also have issues with glute activation. There are 1,000,001 workouts on YouTube to help with glute activation. Honestly, just go around and watch a bunch of videos on how to activate your glutes, find some exercises you can do at home. I don't have any recommendations about specific ones, I'm sorry. But if you found that helped you with your lunge, squeezing your butt together help with your lunge, you might find doing glute activation exercises helps with a lot of things. Speaking of helping with a lot of things, let's look at the pelvis And now pelvis alignment for the last kind of cue. So what you do, stick your butt all the way out in a stance, in your defensive stance, but just holding the sword, whereas stick your butt all the way out and tilt your pelvis all the way in. So, Donald Duck, Mr. Bean. Donald Duck, Mr. Bean. Donald Duck, Mr. Bean. This has got to be the strangest thing I've done on Zoom, but Right. Now what I want you to do is relax and go to about halfway between Donald Duck and Mr. Bean. And you might be like, oh, I'm just back to where I normally am, in which case you probably have a well-aligned pelvis. Or you might be like, oh, that feels a little like I'm still a little bit inwards, or maybe a little bit outwards. In which case, it might be that your pelvis normally doesn't quite sit at the right angle. But we go back. And for when you're doing this for practice, don't just go straight to where you think your pelvis is properly aligned. At the start of a set of lunges, Donald Duck, Mr. Bean, halfway back, as your cue of coming on guard. So holding your pelvis in that position, in the sort of the halfway between position, let's just do some lunges and see how they feel. So lunge, 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 and lunge. Right. So if that felt better, particularly if that felt more explosive, like you're able to, you're able to push more with your lunge, then that's a really, really good cue. And I find having that kind of pelvis adjustment as a ritual to come on guard with is really, really good for your fencing. You might have also you might also find you feel more stable, like your spine is better aligned and you feel more stable and you can lunge further and you feel stronger, in which case that's great as well. And, pelvises kind of do both. And what you might find is that your lower back feels really, really good right now. And I say that because mine does. So yeah, I think I've been spending way too much time sitting down. All right, so that's kind of basic lunges. So I'm just gonna see if there are any questions. And yeah, so a bit of trivia. So there's kind of been this interesting criticism of lunging footwork as something that only really works on smooth floors and ideal surfaces. I don't agree with that on the grounds that I do a lot of lunges on grass and wet grass. And something that I do recommend you'll do is go out and practice fencing on different surfaces, even if it's, even if you're just doing drills. Like if you're at home and there's been rain, the grass in your yard is wet, go out and do some lunges and do some fencing footwork drills just to see how it's different. If there's some bushland near where you are, like you can go for bushwalk, go out into the bush and just do some fencing footwork. Even if you're just using a stick rather than a sword or whatever, just to kind of feel how it's different on different surfaces. Because one thing I discovered the hard way, the first time I fought on wet grass, I was also wearing medieval shoes, which have a completely flat leather sole, like just a thick leather sole. And it didn't go too well for me initially. There was actually a point where I lunged backwards. So I went to kick my foot out, and what I did was dug my heel into the soft grass and lunged myself backwards, which my opponent was very confused by, but I couldn't take advantage because there's no further way. And it was that point that I'm like, hang on, what I need to do is dig in with the edge of my shoe, which is something you do see described in period manuals. They talk about digging in with, like digging in with your feet. And you basically use the edges of the medieval shoe, any shoe from really before the 20th century, to dig into the ground and to get a lot of purchase. And that means you can actually lunge quite well. And I found using that method, soft ground, which is theoretically meant to be a problem, or like wet ground, is actually quite a nice surface to fence on because you can dig in with your heel. You may or may not scuff up someone's nice lawn though. Okay. So if there are no questions, I'm just going to pause recording.